I have been recently reading through the very first of the Dungeon Crawler Carl series. This is a lit RPG novel series. It's very fun, very smartly written, and dead on with the humor. I feel Carl's pain as he deals with inconvenience after inconvenience, and the profound middle of chaos thoughts that he has. Princess Donut is also making me more of a cat person by proxy, if only by a little. You see, I agree with Carl. Cats can be jerks, but at least they don't talk the way they look at you. Regardless, I recently sat down on my home console to play some games away from the channel. See, I have an extensive library of Xbox games on my Xbox Series X, all the way from my very first Xbox 360, and then my Xbox One when I actually started to buy games digitally. So I have a separation between work, hobby, and, play, recreation. I have an old no commentary video of the last 3 hours of Mad Max. I am going to give the entire game a proper playthrough in a few months, but that 3-hour video was captured on this very Xbox console. Still, I jumped in on a fresh save, and I was reminded immediately how much I really enjoy building a character up from nothing. As Max Rockatansky, Mad Max, or the Feral Man, or Raggedy Man, the Warrior Saint, you are reduced to a wanderer. You go from a road warrior to a wanderer, and you must build yourself and your car up from barely having a shirt and the car barely being a frame with an engine in it, to being a wasteland legend. Similarly, in the early Assassin's Creed games, you also build yourself up from nothing. I am going through the first Assassin's Creed for the channel again, and I'm very pleased with that progressive climb in both skill and ability. And I wanted to take a look at that sentiment. Hey there, I'm Jeff the Narrator, and today I hoped we could talk about how it feels to rise up and rise above in video games. Every journey begins with a single step, and if you're anything like me, that step usually transitions into a trip or a fall. In this video, I want to break down and talk about 3 different kinds of progression in this very video. That will be XP and level-based progression, item and loot-based progression, and then finally, narrative and world-based progression. There is also this concept of skill progression, but on the side of the player, but that is going to be true of any video game ever. The more you play, the more you practice, the better you'll be. It is very important, and it's very gratifying, but in this video, I'm going to be purely talking about the evolution of the character and the gameplay systems that reflect that. I know that after years of playing Assassin's Creed that I play like a veteran. That's not what this video is about. Now, you may very well be getting ahead of me and want to say, well, Jeff, the best games typically do all 3 of these very well. And you know what? You are absolutely correct. Have an internet cookie. But let's break down what these are and why each one is so significant. Championed by Bethesda Game Studios RPGs and other Scrolls-likes, we get the famous level up loop. Everything your character does builds into this massive pool of experience until you begin to evolve. Different games approach this in different ways, but let's highlight some major ones. For example, in the Elder Scrolls series, from Arena all the way up to Skyrim, Elder Scrolls Online counts as well, but that's more of an MMO RPG. Your character begins at a base level, with statistics and values dominating how your experience is probably going to occur. You can lean into racial stats and stereotypes, or you can do something absolutely bizarre. Let me explain. An orc thief is probably going to have a harder time being a thief than if a high elf or a Breton tried to be a mage, for example. This is because of their different racial stats. However, the progression is the same. Leveling up skills and earning experience through action will build your pool until you cross a level up threshold. When you do level up, you get a flat increase in your ability, whether that is being more efficient, dealing higher amounts of damage, or creating a better performing item if you're crafting. That is the crawl. Extra points go to Morrowind and Oblivion for the inspirational and sometimes bittersweet level up affirmation messages. Just for fun, I want to list a few now. Upon reaching level 2 in Oblivion, you receive this first message. You realize that all your life you have been coasting along as if you were in a dream. Suddenly, facing the trials of the last few days, you have come alive. That is a profound call to your adventure. You've stepped out of a level 1 life and you've just been coasting and have just now begun to progress as your story has begun. You begin to progress, you begin to develop, you begin to evolve. Upon reaching level 10 in Oblivion, you receive this message. You woke up today with a new sense of purpose. You're no longer afraid of failure. Failure is just an opportunity to learn something new. That's a great sentiment, but this also shows that the character and the player are likely beginning to transition out of the early game and into the mid game. You probably have learned and have a good idea of what you want to become, and you're actively taking the steps to get there. Now, things take a turn around level 15, and I remember being probably 14 or 15, and I got this message. Now you just stay at your peak as long as you can. There's no one stronger in Tamriel, but there's always someone younger, a new challenger. What's that? I mean, that's different. It shows that you may be coming to the end of your potential. That's not a power fantasy, but it is realistic. Level 18 says, with the life you've been living, the punishment your body has taken, there are limits, and maybe you've reached them. Is this what it's like to grow old? And then at level 20, by superhuman effort, you can avoid slipping backwards for a while, but one day you'll lose a step, or drop a beat, or miss a detail, and you'll be gone forever. And then finally, from level 21 and onward, the results of hard work and dedication always look like luck. But you know you've earned every ounce of your success. Even these short messages propel you forward. This is the last of the unique affirmations that change between levels, but it really describes the reality of your character. There is a cap, and that's realistic. And you know what? That's scary, and that's okay. Later entries in the Elder Scrolls series changed this. They tapered that out. I prefer this method from Morrowind and Oblivion, and it made me excited to try again. Press new game as soon as the credits rolled. By and large, leveling up both skills and overall levels increases your ability to thrive in the world in all aspects. You'll be harder to kill because you have more health. You'll be slower to tire with your bigger fatigue pool, and your magical reserves will be deeper if that's something that you are investing in. You'll get stronger, faster, more charismatic. That is the progression path of XP and level-based methodology. In these games, you must increase your skills a certain amount of times before you cross the level threshold, rather than having an XP pool. It means everything you choose to invest in matters. And not all games do this, not even under Bethesda. Continuing on into the other grand series, championed by Bethesda Game Studios, is that of their Fallout games. Now, I want you to note, I'm not mentioning Fallout 1, Fallout 2, or Fallout Tactics, because mainly I think that I need to finish them before I really talk about them outside of the lore implications. Because I can learn lore all day, but if I don't play the game, then I'm not credible in knowing what I'm talking about. However, Fallout 3 and New Vegas operate on a purely XP-based counter. This earns you skill points and perks outside of your initial character creation. You earn experience through exploration, dialogue, combat, and crafting. Then, you level up after a set amount of XP. Boom. Here are your skill points. They can be allotted in any amount across your skills, which exist on a scale from 1 to 100, though if we're being honest, it's really 15 to 100. Then, in Fallout 3, specifically, you get a perk every single level. In Fallout New Vegas, which was developed by Obsidian, this occurs every other level to avoid making overpowered couriers and making each build decision vital. Otherwise, it's very similar to the Elder Scrolls formula. Eventually, you hit a cap. For Fallout 3, it's level 30. For Fallout New Vegas, it's level 50. And then that's your build. Every skill point, every perk eventually builds you up into the best version of your character. You'll personally get better at navigating the world. You'll remember where encounters are, but the calculations and the hard crunch of the numbers, that is handled purely by the system. Now, some of these perks actually end up having level, special, or skill and other perk requirements, which further incentivizes being very particular with your build. And all of that is systems based. Most players familiar with first-person shooters can outshoot VATS, with the exception of like extreme ranges or even shooting equipped explosives off of an enemy. However, that's more of an exception than the actual rule. Now, in Fallout 4, this actually changes. We still stay with experience thresholds, and we go back to receiving a perk every single level. But there's a reason for that. Skills were completely removed from Fallout 4. There are mods that will reintroduce them, but if we're talking about vanilla, they were merged to pull double duty with the perk system. They still have a special requirement, but now the special stats can actually be directly leveled up as well by using a perk point. It's easier than ever to get a perfect 10 in all of your attributes. Now, you're always going to shoot just as accurately with 1 agility as you will with 10. What I'm talking about here is weapon sway. In Fallout 3 and New Vegas, your hands would shake more if you had a lower agility score. Your damage and VATS accuracy might be determined by your perk choices. For example, Gunslinger affects all semi-automatic pistols, or Commando for all automatic weapons. Now this right here separates the need to willingly specify, well, I'm a ballistic pistol build, unless you want to impose that on yourself. No more choosing between guns and energy weapons. This is good, streamlined design, but I've felt like it cheapens the dedication to a character build. And I've said this before. Limitations inspire creativity. However, I'm a fair man, at least I try to be. The times I've gone to fire my weapon and heard that empty click, click, clickety, only to dive over a couch or something and grab an energy weapon that a synth dropped, and be able to perform just as well with that laser pistol as I was my 10mm. Not gonna lie, it's nice in the moment, but how much more dynamic is it when all of that happens and you need to really grit your teeth and make your shots count because you're just not as good with a laser pistol as you are with your 10mm. Speaking of that, I want to talk about Bethesda's latest RPG, Starfield. There is a lot of very loud opinions on Starfield, and I'm even very personally conflicted about the game very, very much. However, the leveling system did evolve past Fallout 4. For better and for worse. Let me explain. In Starfield, you have a general experience point threshold to achieve to get your level up, just like all the others. However, each of your perks now have little miniature requirements, and normally these are achieved with relative ease because, newsflash, if you're going to be doing something, you're going to be doing these tasks through play. I have no problem with racking up ballistics kills or winning dogfights. However, the persuasion perk and the heavy lifting perk will forever set me off. There are seldom chances to do persuasion checks that I've seen, and I fail most of them if I'm not actively investing into that aspect of the game. Heavy lifting, similarly, requires you to become out of breath when over-encumbered several times before it allows a rank up. It goes from the original level by doing to transitioning to fill out this checklist in a few very irritating ways. I get this sentiment. I do. I studied game design in college. If I win countless space battles or firefights, I'll get better at doing that. But if I do all of that and didn't get the first rank up, all of the things that I've done doesn't matter a bit. I did so many fights in space before realizing that my piloting skill would never get better because I took a break from putting perk levels into that skill for something else like ballistics or pistols. I was still doing the work, but the system wasn't going to recognize it because I had already hit my checklist for that perk rank. Still, I get the idea. You don't want to be able to just hoard perk points and then go from 0 to hero when you finally decide to cash in. It promotes engagement, but it does not come off, at least to me, very well thought out. And also, without getting into spoilers, the XP and requirements necessary to build yourself up are realistically going to take several new game pluses. And when you've played the game a dozen times, the burnout on the same character can come on very quickly. And when every character ends the same way, statistically, what's the point? Now, I also understand that Starfield has received several updates that allow you to augment the rate in which you earn XP. But just because they patched something doesn't mean that the design wasn't flawed in the first place. Todd Howard likes to say, I think it's good to miss things. And I think he's right. And I think that sentiment should be considered the next time they want to try a game in the Starfield series. I mean, if it even gets a sequel. I like Starfield. I don't know if it did well enough to justify a sequel, especially with the new CEO of Xbox, Asha Sharma. If it does get the sequel, though, maybe don't make the Starborn stuff so close to home. Maybe distance it away from the character so it's more like dealing with an Akaviri snake person. But that's all of my thoughts on XP and level progression. It's like watching a plant grow and produce fruits or flowers. It's very cool to watch yourself or your character bloom. Alright, Loot Goblins, it is your time to shine. From Borderlands to Dark Souls, sometimes your loot is the only thing that will save you. When looting is a main part of the progression cycle, then what matters is less about how you build your character and more how you equip them. In games like Borderlands, Dark Souls, and even games like Mad Max and the RPG titles of Assassin's Creed Origins through Shadows, your equipment will be the deciding factor before ability and before level. And you see this a lot in MMO RPGs as well, though anytime loot becomes the main progression path, you end up with two things: a type preference and a lot of familiar feeling loot. Let's take this as an example. If you're familiar with the channel, you know that I'm playing through Assassin's Creed Origins right now, and I've developed a type. That's a hunter bow for general range utility, a predator bow for when things just need to die or when things need to be a little bit more accurate. Then there's my regular sword. That's it. That's my type. I don't even equip a second weapon. That's my loadout, and I don't change it. I've found weapons upon weapons. I mean, light bows, warrior bows, dual swords, sickle swords. It doesn't matter. I've got my type. I've even got my in-game sword, and I got that at level 20 right outside of Alexandria. It heals on a kill, and it looks like a gladius with a black blade. I'm good. However, there are many generated bows, weapons, shields, and they're all functionally the same, only with different animations and basic utility, and then the variants are equipped with passive boosts and aesthetic differences. So things, at least for me, become very dull once you lock into your process. I've never used more than one loadout in any Assassin's Creed RPG. Now, that's my experience. And in my experience, it's unnecessary. But I also realize that that might not be true for others. I personally prefer the earlier titles in Assassin's Creed with their focus on what I call the signature equipment loadout, but that's going to be a discussion for our next segment. Though I do have one small tangent. Here's the part that no one thinks about. A loot-based progression system in which a random number generator determines your loot, that is going to be very prone to hit dopamine spikes. I mean, what's the loot? Oh yeah, it's an epic sword, which is just like the common or the uncommon sword that I already have, but it's better. It's the thrill of a chance to get something good. It's very similar to gambling and odds-based combat. I can get the same smack of excitement from hitting a goblin with a crit when I had a 30% chance to hit as I get when I loot a legendary regular sword out of a basic chest. However, it's the loot-based progression that, for me, tires itself out very quickly. Tied with XP and level-based progression as my personal favorite, narrative and world-based progression is it's the bee's knees, it's the chef's kiss, it's the fresh butter or the rare steak. This is where I can be more relaxed with a progression path, but also feel like it has been earned. These are your Uncharted's, Metroidvanias, Pitfall: The Lost Expedition, The Legend of Zelda, Mad Max, classic God of War, new God of War, Red Dead Revolver, Redemption, and Redemption 2, and then Grand Theft Auto, classic Assassin's Creed, Metro, Star Wars. The list could literally go on and on and on. And are we really surprised that a guy calling himself Jeff the Narrator really enjoys narrative-based progression? See, I've talked about this game a lot, and I really wish I could find a PC port. But in Pitfall: The Lost Expedition, you progress by finding items and pages of something called the Heroic Handbook. These unlock the physical tools and the specific abilities that you're going to need to progress in the world. For example, the heroic dash is very helpful for running away from enemies, but also for crossing hot lava. Or, the unsung hero of the Intertube allows you to float lazily down a river where before you would run out of time on your swimming gauge and drown. All of these tools and abilities are awarded through exploration, narrative moments, and beating 4 scattered temples throughout the jungle. In the Legend of Zelda series, this is also the formula, but on a much grander scale. You receive many items, from equipment to tools to artifact items like the 3 spiritual stones from Ocarina of Time, or even the 7 emblems of the sages from the adult portion of the same game. Each special item or tool is instrumental in finishing the dungeon that you find the item inside of. Take the slingshot from the Great Deku Tree, or the hover boots from the Shadow Temple, even the Master Sword in general, or the long shot. And they aren't one-trick ponies either. They will come up constantly for the rest of the game. In Twilight Princess, you acquire the claw shot, which is a hook shot, but it clamps, in the Lake Bed Temple at the bottom of Lake Hylian. Then later in the Sky Temple, you acquire a second claw shot, allowing for a much faster and extended traversal because you don't have to drop from a wall. You can just claw shot to another platform. Pitfall Harry, Link, they both build up in tools and ability towards their peak condition. You can also see this in Naughty Dog's platformer series Jak and Daxter, and then Jak 2 and Jak 3. You get new abilities, new items. In the Precursor Legacy, which is the first one, you need to power your shields, different gadgets with these things called power cells. And that's really the main drive, is that you're doing all these weird little side quests and exploration because you need power cells to justify your progression later on. Let's pivot to something else. Take Solid Snake, Raiden, and Naked Snake from the first 3 Metal Gear Solid games. This approach is phenomenal for what I'm talking about. All 3 have exceptional training, but they need to rise above. The nature of their sneaking mission means that they take no equipment into the field with them, so on-site procurement, OSP, is vital to mission success. However, these operatives grow their arsenals, eventually becoming capable of holding their own against a ridiculous amount of odds. The Rogues Gallery battles against the enemy squadron units like Foxhound, Dead Cell, or the Cobra unit, facing Metal Gears or Proto-Metal Gears. It's only by building themselves up throughout the mission that they get to where they need to be to survive and eventually overcome the mission. And while we're talking about it, let's shift back to Assassin's Creed. In the original, Altair is a master assassin at the very beginning of the game, having the best combat equipment and tools and abilities ever. However, due to his demotion, courtesy of Al-Mualim and his pride, we start from zero. We are even called. Al-Mualim looks at us and says, "You are now a child to us in our eyes, just like when you first joined our order." We start from zero at the end of the tutorial. No hidden blade, no weapons, not even the gloves and reinforced armor that help us with grab hangs and catches. This reverts our ability in all aspects significantly. However, as Altair progresses, as he redeems himself, and as he takes the lives of the 9 Templar targets, he does build back up. And not only does gameplay improve, but so does Altair's signature appearance. coming back to his previous esteem, which is highlighted by how easy and flashy the defense of Masyaf is just before the end of the tutorial intro. This does happen several more times in very different ways, following the same formula throughout the series. In Assassin's Creed 2, Ezio begins even less trained than Altair, having been a Florentine noble. Our first weapon is a sword, which we lose very quickly. And then we're left with the hidden blade, which is helped repaired back to function by our friend Leonardo da Vinci. Once we transition out to Monteroggioni, we receive proper training from Uncle Mario and unlock the sword, the small blade, and throwing knives. Ezio actually trains for weeks on end to become proficient, and all the while also requires constant upgrading of not only his arms and armor, but the Villa Auditore. These changes are significant, and they are visual. You get to watch as Ezio and his assets grow. And then when you look back and witness everything that's changed, you get that reinforced validation of the process. So, we've come to the end, where we put it all together and we remember that sentiment from earlier. The best games loop all of these progression types together. Games like Mad Max, Assassin's Creed, The Legend of Zelda, the list goes on. And this is where I tie it back to life. I think that's because we as humans like to be able to measure growth and success. If you can't seem to succeed in life with life goals, you can succeed in video games. It's therapeutic, it's validating, and it can help you develop a sense of drive toward all of the progression that you seek in your real life. My personal favorite progressions are the progressions of a character that I can see visually, because it is interesting to change. If I can see it visually, if I can feel mechanically and observe narratively, I really get a lot out of that. That's also why I like to simulate the progression of time when I'm able to, with clothing, hair, and scarring through robust character creators. And I'm sure that you'll watch me do that regularly as those tools become more and more available with newer games. However, visual customization and visual storytelling can be a topic for another video. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, thank you so much for tuning in today. What is your favorite way to experience progression in video games? Does number go up do it for you? Or do you like building up over the course of a story? Both can be true, I suppose. Let me know what topics you'd like me to talk about in the comments below, and I hope to see you in the next one. Have a great day, and as always, keep telling stories.